She stood there with the posture of a conqueror, clutching a clipboard that she wielded like a divine scepter, her badge gleaming in the harsh Texas sun, completely unaware that she was tightening the noose around her own neck with every breath she took. Picture this moment. Freeze frame it in your mind. Patricia Vance, the self-appointed queen of Oakwood Enclave, filming my arrest by the community pool, the scent of her cloying lavender perfume thick enough to choke a horse, mixing with the sharp tang of chlorine and the metallic click of handcuffs fastening around my wrists. My 8-year-old daughter, Maya, pressed her terrified face against the chain-link fence, watching her father get hauled away like a common criminal. "Officer," Patricia announced, her voice dripping with that specific brand of suburban venom that sounds polite only on the surface. "This man refuses to adhere to community standards despite multiple warnings regarding trespassing and hostile behavior." The irony was so rich, so painfully beautiful, that I almost laughed right there in the back of the cruiser. While Patricia was busy playing dictator with her homeowners association powers, puffed up on borrowed authority, she had absolutely no idea that she was targeting the senior compliance auditor for Apex Community Solutions, the very corporate entity that held the master contract for her precious neighborhood. For 3 years, I had held the ultimate veto power over every single decision she made. And as I smiled directly into the lens of her iPhone, watching her expression crack like a frozen lake, I wondered what you would do if a bully spent 18 months harassing the one person who signed their paychecks. Let's rewind the tape to when I was naive enough to think Oakwood Enclave was paradise. I'm Elias Thorne, a former military logistics officer turned corporate fixer. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, leaving a hole in the universe the size of a planet, I needed a fortress, a safe harbor where I could raise Maya in peace. This subdivision, with its 800 homes and sparkling amenities, seemed like the dream, costing me a premium in HOA fees that I happily paid for the promise of stability, until I crossed paths with Patricia. Imagine a woman who treats a subdivision like a personal fiefdom, a 50-something real estate agent driving a silver Mercedes with vanity plates that read "Blessed," patrolling the streets like a shark in a kiddie pool. Patricia had a terrifying talent for materializing out of thin air, armed with a tape measure to check grass height down to the millimeter. Our first collision wasn't a skirmish. It was a declaration of war, happening right in the middle of Maya's 8th birthday party. The day was supposed to be filled with cake and cannonballs until the gate latch clicked and Patricia's heels clattered onto the pool deck like gunfire. "Excuse me, Mr. Thorne," she interrupted, ignoring the children splashing in the water. "I need to see the registration forms for these non-resident guests immediately, as per the new safety protocol requiring 48-hour pre-approval." When I politely pointed out that I had memorized the bylaws, an occupational hazard of my job, and that no such rule existed, her smile thinned into a razor blade. "As president, I have emergency executive powers to enact measures for community security," she lied, her eyes dead and cold. "That means you are currently in violation, resulting in a $200 fine per unregistered child." The party died instantly. The other parents packed up their kids in a hurried, awkward silence to avoid the drama, and I was left holding a melting ice cream cake while Maya cried, asking why the mean lady made her friends go away. That question lit a fire in my gut that would eventually burn Patricia's empire to the ground. That night, I pulled the Oakwood Enclave governing documents, poring over the legalese with the focus of a forensic pathologist. I confirmed there was zero mention of emergency presidential powers, but Patricia was just getting started. The following week, the wellness checks began, a euphemism for her daily patrols past my house, where she would photograph the angle of my trash cans and the placement of my mailbox. My bird feeder was flagged as unauthorized exterior ornamentation, and my house numbers were apparently in a non-compliant font, resulting in 3 separate violation notices in a fortnight. It took me a moment to realize this wasn't just bureaucracy run amok. It was a targeted strike designed to make me sell and leave. Patricia wasn't interested in compliance. She was interested in submission, targeting young families and veterans who might have the spine to question her 23-page manifesto of fabricated rules. She installed a security camera on the clubhouse that was curiously angled directly at my driveway, turning my home into a fishbowl. But here is the fatal flaw in Patricia's strategy. She thought she was playing chess with a novice, not realizing she was picking a fight with a grandmaster of HOA oversight. The military teaches you patience, and my day job literally involved writing the operational playbooks for communities exactly like this one. I knew the statutes better than the lawyers she pretended to consult. So instead of exploding, I started a file, documenting every interaction, waiting for her to cross the line from annoyance to illegality. Her first major tactical error came disguised as a parking crackdown. She started slapping $50 fines on windshields for a rule that didn't exist. Guest parking limited to 2 hours. Mrs. Higgins, my elderly neighbor who survived on Social Security, was the first casualty, ticketed exactly 2 minutes past the imaginary deadline while baking cookies for her grandkids. When I marched over to Patricia's door to confront her, recording the conversation on my phone, she claimed the rule was passed in an emergency executive session. Which emergency session? I asked, my voice calm. State law requires open meetings and 30-day notice for rule changes. Her composure faltered for a microsecond before she slammed the door. I went to the next board meeting fully loaded, armed with a binder of highlighted statutes. When I stood up and demanded proof of the vote for the parking rule, producing evidence of $850 in illegal fines collected from vulnerable residents, Patricia turned a shade of crimson. She stammered about protecting property values, but the seed of doubt had been planted in the room. Other board members shifted in their seats, realizing Patricia's loose interpretation of the rules was exposing them to liability. But she was too far gone, too addicted to the power to stop. She doubled down, targeting the weak, the elderly, the single parents, systematically bullying them until they moved. The real crime, the one that would eventually hang her, started in mid-July. At the peak of a scorching summer, she sent out a blast email declaring the pool closed indefinitely due to critical structural failures. By dawn, the pool was surrounded by orange cones and yellow tape, the water still sparkling and perfect. And then, a savior appeared, Vance & Sons Contracting, a company that just so happened to be owned by her brother-in-law, offering to perform the emergency repairs for a staggering $8,000, a no-bid contract pushed through under the guise of imminent danger. It took me exactly 30 seconds of searching the state licensing database to discover that Vance & Sons wasn't a pool specialist. They were a glorified landscaping crew with zero credentials for aquatic structural repair. While Patricia was busy terrifying the community with tales of potential lawsuits to justify the expense, I was digging through county records. I found absolutely no permits filed for the work, no inspection reports triggering the closure, nothing but smoke and mirrors. I watched from my car as her brother-in-law's crew showed up with pressure washers, spending days hosing down a pool deck that was already pristine, charging the community thousands of dollars for what amounted to a glorified car wash. I called the county inspector, a guy named Rodriguez, who showed up unannounced the next day. Patricia practically ran out of her house, waving her arms to intercept him, but it was too late. Rodriguez cleared the pool in 20 minutes, declaring it structurally sound and finding no evidence of the emergency she claimed existed. She was forced to reopen the gates, but not before the invoice from Vance & Sons miraculously shrank from $8,000 to $3,200 for consultation and cleaning. That was the moment the pattern clicked into place. This wasn't just a power trip, it was a piggy bank. Patricia was using the HOA funds as a personal ATM for her extended family. Every time a crisis emerged, a relative's company was there to solve it. Landscaping, security, repairs, all flowing cash into pockets connected to her bloodline. She was laundering money through manufactured emergencies, counting on the apathy of the residents to hide her tracks. Furious that her pool scheme had been exposed, Patricia went nuclear. She implemented a new policy that disruptive residents would be suspended from amenity access pending board review. Disruptive was code for anyone who asked to see a receipt. I received a certified letter notifying me that my family was banned from all common areas due to a pattern of hostile governance interference. The surveillance escalated to a level that felt less like a suburb and more like a minimum security prison. But the breaking point came on a Tuesday, with the thermometer hitting 103 degrees, when Maya looked at me with those big, sad eyes, holding her neon pink goggles, and asked why we couldn't just go for a quick swim. I decided right then that I was done playing by the rules of a madwoman. The water looked like liquid diamonds under the brutal sun, and for 10 glorious minutes, Maya was just a kid again. Then Patricia materialized like the Grim Reaper in designer sandals, her phone already recording. "You are trespassing on private property," she screeched. "I am calling the police immediately." I stood there in the waist-deep water, calm as a monk, and told her to go ahead. Officer Miller arrived looking weary. Patricia played the victim perfectly, trembling and pointing at me, a dad in swim trunks holding a pool noodle, as if I were an armed insurgent. "Sir, you need to exit the pool," Miller said. I walked to the edge and pulled my waterproof phone case from my pocket. "Officer, I am a deeded owner in this community, current on all dues," I said, my voice steady. "Can you ask Mrs. Vance to show you the court order that allows an HOA board to unilaterally strip property rights without due process?" That was the pivot point. Patricia started stammering, screaming that I was dangerous and intimidating. Officer Miller looked at me, calm and collected, then at Maya floating peacefully, and finally at the shrieking woman. The cop's demeanor shifted. He took my documents, read through the bylaws, and turned to Patricia. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't see any authority here for you to ban a paying resident. If you try to force him to leave, you could be liable for harassment." Patricia unraveled, realizing she had just created an official police record of her own overreach. But as I walked home that night, a thought struck me, a memory buried deep in my client database at work. I sat at my computer and pulled up the master files for Apex Community Solutions. And there it was, the smoking gun that made my hands shake. Apex was the parent developer for Oakwood Enclave, and under the development agreement, they retained audit and operational override authority for the first 5 years of the community's existence. I stared at the screen, laughing quietly. Patricia had been playing dictator for 18 months, terrorizing the neighborhood, unaware that the man she was harassing held the keys to the kingdom. I logged into the Apex Financial Oversight portal and found a graveyard of financial ethics. $47,000 in questionable payments, double billing schemes, kickbacks from contractors. This went beyond theft. She had hired unlicensed contractors like Vance and Sons, which could void the master insurance policy and leave 800 families personally liable for millions in damages. I could just fire her, quietly fix it, and move on. But then I looked at the ledger and saw Mrs. Higgins' name, saw the fines paid from pensions, saw the families forced to move. No, a quiet firing wasn't enough. I needed to destroy her. I transformed my kitchen island into a war room. I recruited the neighbors Patricia had alienated, Mrs. Higgins, the Rodriguez family, forming a resistance cell called Residents for Accountability. We reached out to Simon Bell, an investigative journalist, and fed him the contractor fraud angle. We were quiet, methodical, letting Patricia believe she had won. Panic set in for her when rumors of my organizing started to whisper through the streets. In a desperate bid to crush the uprising, she called an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice, proposing a special security assessment of $500 per month to combat hostile resident elements. It was financial warfare designed to price out the opposition. She even cornered me at the grocery store, offering a veiled bribe before switching to threats, hissing that life would get very difficult for Maya if I didn't back down. She didn't know I was recording that conversation too. Simon Bell's article was ready to drop. Apex Community Solutions had completed their internal review, and I had officially triggered the oversight clause. Patricia, in her final act of hubris, called a massive community meeting to expel me from the HOA and initiate foreclosure proceedings on my home, unaware that I had arranged for the venue to be packed with media, county officials, and the entire neighborhood. The community center was a powder keg, packed with 85 residents. Patricia marched in like royalty, taking the stage to announce that outside agitators were ruining the community. She pointed a shaking finger at me and declared me a threat to safety. I stood up. The room went silent. "Good evening," I said, my voice projecting without a microphone. "I'm Elias Thorne, and I am the Senior Compliance Auditor for Apex Community Solutions, the company that owns the oversight rights to this board." The color drained from her face so fast, she looked like a ghost. She had been trying to foreclose on her boss. "For 18 months, I continued, holding up the authorization letter. "I have documented $53,000 in fraudulent payments, unlicensed contracting work, and a systematic campaign of harassment. I projected the financial records onto the screen behind her, the kickbacks, the double billing, the fake repairs. The crowd erupted. Mrs. Higgins stood up waving her receipts. People were shouting, demanding answers. Patricia's lawyer physically restrained her from grabbing the mic, trying to stop her from incriminating herself further. The vote was a massacre, 73-4 to remove the entire board immediately. I announced the appointment of an interim management team from Apex, the restitution of all illegal fines, and the opening of a criminal investigation. Patricia fled the room through the side door, shielding her face from the news cameras, her dynasty collapsing in a heap of public shame. The police were waiting for her in the parking lot, not to arrest me, but to serve her with papers for fraud. The next morning, the sound of the pool gate opening was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Maya cannonballed into the water, her neon pink goggles flashing in the sun, screaming with joy as she surfaced in a liberated community. Patricia resigned via email at 3 a.m., eventually facing charges for fraud, mail tampering, and filing false police reports. Her brother-in-law's company was shuttered, and every stolen cent was clawed back and returned to the neighbors who needed it most. We didn't just win, we cleansed the rot. Oakwood Enclave healed. We turned the surveillance spots into community gardens and lowered the fees. But as I watched my daughter swim, I couldn't help but think about the fragility of justice. We won because I had the specific, rare power to fight back. I was an insider with the keys to the castle. But what happens to the neighborhoods where there is no secret auditor living down the street? What happens when the patricius of the world target people who can't read the bylaws or afford a lawyer? It makes you wonder, is the system designed to protect our homes, or is it just a playground for petty tyrants waiting for a chance to strike? This is Elias Thorne, signing off. Don't forget to lock your gates.